The first call came at the 12:03 a.m. I remember it clearly because I had just shut down my computer and was getting ready to call it a night. The ring broke through the quiet of my apartment, startling me. The number was unknown, annoying, sure, but not unheard of. Maybe a wrong number, or someone too oblivious to realize what time it was. I ignored it, figuring they'd get the hint and hang up. The next night, at exactly 12:03 a.m., my phone lit up again with the same unknown number. It was strange, but I still didn't think much of it. Probably just a late-night telemarketer or someone who got my number by mistake. I let it ring out, figuring they'd stop after a few tries. But when it happened the third night, at the exact same time, I started to feel uneasy. What were the chances of a wrong number being so punctual? Still, I chose to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing to worry about. By the end of the week, the calls had become a nightly ritual, always at 12:03 a.m., always from the same blank, untraceable number. It was unnerving. Each ring felt louder, sharper, like a knife slicing through the stillness of my apartment. One night, I finally gave in and answered, if only to tell whoever it was to knock it off. But when I pressed the phone to my ear, there was no voice on the other end, just silence. A hollow, unsettling silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I hung up and tried to brush it off, but a gnawing anxiety was beginning to eat away at me. I blocked the number the next day, hoping it would solve the problem. That night, I waited, trying not to watch the clock. At 12:03 a.m., my phone didn't ring. For a moment I felt a rush of relief, but then it buzzed, a different unknown number but still untraceable. I let it ring, my heart pounding, but when it stopped, I checked my call log. The call had come at exactly 12:03 a.m. That's when I realized this wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate, and it was meant for me. Sleep became impossible. Every night I braced myself as the clock inched closer to midnight, my anxiety building with each passing minute. I tried ignoring the calls, but each ring sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel the phone vibrating on my nightstand, mocking me. I switched my phone off one night, but even then I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying the endless ringing over and over. Who was calling me? What did they want? After a week of restless nights, I changed my number. I figured, worst case scenario, I'd have to send out a few texts to friends letting them know. I hoped that would finally be the end of it. But that same night, at 12:03 a.m., the new phone number rang. I felt a chill run down my spine. How did they get my new number? I hadn't even had a chance to tell anyone about it yet. Panic crept in as I watched the phone vibrate, the screen glowing in the dark. This wasn't just someone messing with me anymore. This was something else, something far more sinister. I started to dread the nights. Every creak of the floorboard, every whisper of wind outside my window felt amplified, like the world was trying to warn me. I began to hear things, faint, barely audible voices, echoing in the silence. I'd jump at the slightest sound, my heart racing, my hands shaking. I was losing sleep, losing my mind. I felt like I was being watched, even when I was alone in my apartment. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were eyes on me, waiting, just out of sight. One night, after another sleepless stretch, I couldn't take it anymore. I was tired, angry, and desperate for answers. When the phone rang at 12:03 a.m., I picked it up and, with a mix of fear and defiance, answered. "Who is this?" I snapped, my voice cracking. Silence, the kind of silence that presses down on you, heavy and suffocating. I was about to hang up when I heard it, a faint, almost inaudible whisper, like someone was speaking from a distance. "Soon. the voice said. One word, heavy with malice. The line went dead, and I was left sitting there, holding the phone, my hand trembling. I don't know why, but that single word terrified me more than anything else. It wasn't just the word itself, but the way it was said, like a promise or a threat. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew then that whoever was on the other end of the line wasn't just trying to scare me. They were warning me. I tried to get help. I went to the police, but they told me there wasn't much they could do. Probably a prank, they said, shrugging it off. I tried asking friends if they'd been getting any strange calls, but no one had heard anything. I was alone in this, and it felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The calls didn't stop. Each night, at 12:03 a.m., like clockwork, my phone would ring. I started to notice things around my apartment. Objects slightly out of place. Doors I was sure I'd locked left ajar. The faint smell of smoke lingering in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, walking through my home while I was out. I installed cameras, but they never caught anything. Whoever or whatever was doing this was too smart to be caught on tape. And then one night, everything changed. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, drained from the constant anxiety and lack of rest. The phone's ring jolted me awake, and without thinking, I picked it up. There was no silence this time, no waiting. Just the same voice whispering so close, it felt like someone was standing right behind me. Look outside. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't want to look, but my body moved on its own, compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity. I walked to the window, pulling the curtain back just a sliver, and there, standing under the streetlight, was a figure. Tall, motionless, facing my apartment. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were looking at me. My phone slipped out of my hand, crashing to the floor, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped by the gaze of someone I couldn't see. The figure raised their hand, slowly, deliberately, and waved. That simple gesture, casual and friendly, made my skin crawl. And then they turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for many nights after. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, but I know this. They're not done with me yet. I always thought I had a pretty average life. College classes, part-time job, occasional nights out with friends. And yeah, my phone was like a beacon for random texts. Wrong numbers, spam, accidental messages. I didn't think much of it, just shrugged and moved on. So when I got that first text one Friday night, I didn't pay it any mind. Just another stranger who dialed the wrong number. Hey, it's me. Can you pick me up? I was in the middle of watching some mindless TV show, half asleep on the couch. Without thinking, I replied, "Sorry, you got the wrong number." Simple, routine. I'd done it 100 times before. But then my phone buzzed again, almost immediately. "No, I don't. I'm at the usual spot. Please hurry, it's cold." I remember frowning, sitting up straighter. That wasn't normal. Who was this person? There was no name, no hint of familiarity, just the message. For a moment I considered blocking the number, but something made me hesitate. A strange sense of curiosity, maybe. Or maybe it was just boredom. Then, another buzz. This time it was a photo. I opened it, expecting to see some sort of prank, maybe a selfie or a random meme. But what I saw made my skin crawl. It was a grainy, dark picture of a streetlight, flickering dimly. Underneath it, there was a figure, standing with their back to the camera. I couldn't see much, just long dark hair cascading down their shoulders, their posture stiff, almost unnatural. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to say. "Who is this?" I finally typed, sending the message before I could second-guess myself. My heart was pounding, but I didn't know why. Something about the photo had unsettled me. Maybe it was the way the streetlight flickered, casting erratic shadows around the figure, making them look distorted. Then the reply came. "Don't you recognize me? It's me, Lisa, your Lisa." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Lisa, that name. It was like a ghost from my past, a name I hadn't allowed myself to say in over a year. Because Lisa was gone. Dead. I'd watched as they lowered her casket into the ground, heard the dirt thud against the wood. A car accident, they said. Instant. No pain. But the pain was all mine. Every day since then. I stared at my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. It had to be a prank, some cruel joke, but who would do that? Who would be that twisted? My hands were shaking as I typed. "This isn't funny. Who is this? Really?" The response was instant. "It's me, Mark. Come on, you know it's me." I wanted to throw my phone across the room, pretend I hadn't seen any of it, but I couldn't. I was frozen, my eyes locked on the screen, waiting for the next message. I couldn't tear myself away, even as my mind screamed at me to stop. Then more texts, each one creeping further under my skin. "I'm at the street where we used to meet. You know, the usual spot." Another photo? And this time I could see more details. The same streetlight, but the figure was gone. In its place was something small and glinting, barely visible in the darkness. My phone buzzed again, and I flinched. "Don't make me wait, Mark. It's cold out here." I swallowed, feeling a lump rise in my throat. The messages kept coming, each one more unnerving than the last. They referenced things only Lisa and I could have known. Private jokes, memories we shared, our first date, the night we stayed up late stargazing, talking about forever. Words I hadn't spoken to anyone since she died. I could almost hear her voice in my head, soft and sweet, just like it used to be. There was no way anyone else could have known these things. And yet, she was dead. I knew she was dead. So how could this be happening? I told myself to stop reading, to just block the number and forget about it. But then, one message came through that made my blood run cold. "Remember that night we went stargazing? You promised me forever under the same stars. I'm waiting for you, Mark. Don't break your promise." I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted the salt on my lips. The memory hit me like a wave, drowning me in its intensity. That night had been perfect. We'd driven out to the countryside, miles away from the city lights, and watched the meteor shower. It was our anniversary. I'd given her a small heart-shaped locket, engraved with the words, "Forever yours." She wore it every day after that, said it was her good luck charm. I hadn't seen that locket since the accident. The paramedics told me it was probably lost in the crash. But then, my phone buzzed and a new picture appeared. It was the same streetlight, the same empty street. But now, lying on the ground, was the locket, the same one I'd given Lisa. I don't remember deciding to leave, but the next thing I knew, I was driving. The streets were empty, deserted. The night seemed to stretch on forever, as if I was the only person left in the world. I found myself on that street, the one we always used to meet on, the usual spot. The streetlight flickered as I pulled up, casting eerie shadows over the sidewalk. I stepped out of the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep my grip on my phone. There it was, lying under the streetlight, the locket glinting faintly in the darkness. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in my hand, and a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. I turned, looking around, half expecting to see her standing there, waiting for me with that same gentle smile she always had, but there was no one. just the flickering light and the cold, empty street. Then my phone buzzed one last time. "I'm here, Mark. Turn around." I turned, and there she was, standing just a few feet away. Her hair was wet, hanging limp around her shoulders, her clothes dark and clinging to her frame. She looked exactly as she had the last time I saw her, just before the crash. But her eyes, they were different. Cold, empty, like she was looking straight through me. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at each other. I wanted to say something, to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. Then she smiled, a slow, sad smile that made my blood turn to ice. "You promised," she whispered. "Don't break your promise." And then the streetlight flickered one last time, and she was gone. I remember the first time it happened. The call. It was late, and I was barely holding it together. Nana had only been gone for a few weeks, and the pain was still raw, like an open wound that refused to heal. I was trying to distract myself, scrolling through meaningless feeds on my phone, when the screen lit up, and I saw the caller ID. My heart stopped. It was Nana's number. I stared at the screen, not quite believing what I was seeing. I even rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a mistake. Maybe my phone was glitching, or maybe I had saved the number somewhere and forgotten to delete it. But the name was there, clear as day, blinking on my screen. Nana. I should have let it ring out. I should have deleted the number and never thought about it again. But instead, I swiped to answer, my hand trembling. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't know what I expected. A dead line, a misdial, maybe even a wrong number. But the line was not dead. There was a faint, almost imperceptible crackle, like static, and then silence. For a moment I thought I could hear something beneath the static, a faint echo, like a voice trying to break through. But then it was gone, and I was left there, holding the phone to my ear, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I hung up, my hands shaking, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just a mistake. But the feeling of dread, like something heavy and cold sitting in my chest, wouldn't go away. A few days later, I got the voicemail. "You have one new voicemail." The robotic voice was monotonous, routine, but it filled me with a cold, creeping fear. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the play button. Part of me didn't want to hear it, didn't want to know, but I needed to. I pressed play. The message was short, garbled, like it had been recorded in a storm. The static was thick, swallowing up most of the words, but I could still make out fragments. "Miss you. Need to. Important." It was Nana's voice. There was no mistaking it. I'd heard that voice 1,000 times, soft and warm, like a hug. But this wasn't soft or warm. It was strained, urgent, like she was trying to get a message to me and something was stopping her. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the message was cut off, replaced by a hiss of static that made my skin crawl. I listened to it over and over, trying to make out more of the words, trying to find some hidden meaning, but it was always the same. A few fleeting, broken words that only left me with more questions. I thought about calling the phone company, asking them how it was possible, but I already knew what they'd say. They'd say it wasn't possible. Nana's phone had been disconnected. I'd made sure of it. I couldn't let it go. I started obsessing, spending hours at night searching for answers. Maybe it was some kind of glitch, I told myself. Maybe there was a logical explanation. But there was a small, dark part of my mind that whispered a different possibility, one that I was too scared to say out loud. What if Nana was trying to tell me something? What if somehow she hadn't really gone? The calls kept coming, always late at night, always from Nana's number. I never answered them. I didn't have the courage. But every time my phone lit up, that same name on the screen, I felt a jolt of fear, mixed with a twisted kind of hope. I'd let the calls go to the voicemail, but they never left a message. Just silence, and then the line would cut off. One night I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind was buzzing with all the questions that had been haunting me, and I was exhausted, but I couldn't rest. And then my phone buzzed. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. This time, I answered. Hello? My voice was steadier than I felt. The line was silent, but I could hear the faint crackle of static, and beneath it, something else. A melody, soft and slow, like a lullaby. Nana used to hum it when I was a kid, rocking me to sleep. Hearing it now, through the static, made my blood run cold. Nana? I whispered, my throat tight. Is that you? The melody continued, drifting through the receiver and then barely audible. I heard my name. My heart leapt into my throat. What do you want? I said, louder now, almost shouting. Why are you calling me? The melody stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the crackle of static, and then I heard her voice, again, clearer this time, as if she was standing right beside me. I need to tell you. The line cut off. I sat there, staring at the dark screen of my phone, my mind reeling. I tried calling the number back, but it wouldn't connect. It was like it had never existed. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, listening to the silence, waiting for the phone to ring again. But it didn't. I thought I was losing my mind. I started seeing Nana everywhere, in the shadows, in the corner of my eye. I heard her voice when there was no one else around, felt her presence when I was alone. I started having dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams, where I was back in her house, and everything was exactly as it had been, but wrong. Dark, twisted, as if something terrible had happened there. In the dreams, I'd walk through the empty rooms, calling out for her, and I'd hear her voice faint and distant, like she was trapped somewhere, calling for help. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never find her. The calls stopped after that night, but the dreams didn't. They got worse, more real, like they were trying to show me something I didn't want to see. One night I dreamed I was standing in front of Nana's old house, and the front door was open, just a crack. I stepped inside, and everything was dark, except for a single light flickering at the end of the hallway. I walked towards it, my footsteps echoing in the silence, and when I reached the light, I saw her. She was standing there, in the shadows, her back to me. Nana, I called out, but she didn't move. I stepped closer, and she turned around. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear, and her mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. And then, in the darkness, I saw something else. Something moving behind her, reaching out for her, and she screamed, a scream so loud and so full of terror that it jolted me awake. I never went back to sleep. The next morning I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was a moment of silence, and then a voice deep and cold that sent chills down my spine. "Stop looking," it said, and then the line went dead. I still don't know what happened. I don't know if it was real or if I was just losing my mind. But I've stopped looking, because whatever it was, I'm afraid of what I might find.